Thank you. Wow, you guys were awesome. We even made up like a minute and a half on the agenda. So you, as you can see, you can actually say a lot of really important things in less than 5 minutes. So it is my pleasure to introduce Pete Silva, who is an international water policy consultant, but has a very long history working in water. He was the former assistant administrator for I'm having a hard time. For US EPA and Office of Water under President Obama. And he was on the State Water Resources Control Board for California for 6 years. And now he serves on our Fish and Game Commission. As you can tell, he hates policy work. But so Pete is going to come up and he is going to introduce our next panel.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. Also wanted to say that I'm also a proud board member of WELL, which is Water Education for Latino Leaders, and there's some board members here and staff, and Celeste, who's been doing a lot of the work to prepare for this. I'm really proud to introduce the next session, which is Communities Creating Opportunity Out of Climate Change. And if you've been hearing, obviously yesterday and today is how climate change is really impacting the way that we manage water and the way that we interact with water. And obviously there's a ton of challenges associated with that, but with challenges come opportunities, as we all know. And so we're really excited to talk about those opportunities, especially in the area of how communities can interact. So we have a number of expert speakers to set the background for you, to discuss the challenges and then the successful strategies we feel for water management in a changing climate. We will look at the difficult but critical need of mobilizing communities to action to implement a new paradigm of water management, one that puts nature and people at the center, utilizes green and indigenous infrastructure for a resilient response to climate change. And I also want to highlight that before and after lunch, we're going to be facilitating some discussions between the audience and the speaker, so we're looking forward to that. So it's my pleasure to begin to kick this off. I'm really excited to introduce, for a global perspective, Giuseppe Arduino, who works for UNESCO's International Hydrological Program in Paris. Giuseppe, I'm looking forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm very happy to be here in San Francisco and reporting on this opening of this panel. Let's see if I understand that. Yeah. So I would like to introduce, I know that everybody knows about the major issues on water and climate change, but I think it's worth to repeat them somewhat to refresh memories, although those are bad news. So I will start with some figures and facts on climate change, and then I would like also to bring some good news in terms of what we call now is citizen science, so the involvement of citizens into science, as it's called, and also to bring some experience on nature-based solution for water, in particular green infrastructure involving communities and local and at local community level. And last will be some information about this program, which is a UNESCO program. It's called LINKS, Local and Indigenous Knowledge System Programs. This is not done by our division, the Division of Water Sciences, but another division in the science sector of UNESCO, which is called Policy and Capacity Building. So I will start with some of the bad news. So we humans are changing, of course, the global water system in a globally significant way without adequate knowledge of the system and thus its responses to change. And so there are a lot of questions that are posed about. So is the water cycle really changing? Is there an increased risk, growing vulnerability, more disasters, less water for people, crisis is looming? Which crisis? Is it global or local? Of course, there's is a global, and we all know about it, but there's also a local, and local intervention are sometimes more feasible. So if we see some key changes from the 900s, so over 100 years ago, we have increased our population 6 times. The area of cropland has almost doubled. The area of pasture has increased about 75%, and the area covered by tropical forests reduced almost 25%. And dams, so the gray infrastructures, now intercept almost 40% of the runoff from the continents. And some facts are that 80% of the human population live in a drier half of our planet, and 0.8 billion people live without access to safe water, and nearly 2.5 billion without access to adequate sanitation. And notwithstanding these amounts, the numbers are not changing, are not improving in a good way every year. 6 to 8 million humans being killed each year from water-related disaster and disease. Climate change, so, is aggravating further this situation. And another fact which is very alarming is that 85%, I put a question mark because sometimes some reports say between 70 and 85, so I believe it's 85 according to the last report of 2 years ago. So 85% of the world's total wastewater is discharged without adequate or any treatment. So what we use, we thanks our ecosystem, what we provide us, and we fill them in with this fantastic dirty water. And then also another area of issue is that 145 nations have territories within at least one transboundary river basins, and this sometimes doesn't help because it provides further conflicts. So there's an increasing water scarcity. I'm not telling you you're in the thirsty California. I know that you know better than I. And also, climate change will exacerbate the frequency and severity of floods and droughts. In fact, in the last 20 years, floods have accounted for almost 47% of all water-related disaster, affecting 2.3 billion people. And also, this has an impact on economics and is estimated at over $40 billion per year across all economic sectors are lost from floods and droughts. So what are the challenges? This is what the International Panel on Climate Change reported in its last 5th report, that for each degree in Celsius of global mean temperature rise, we have 70% of the global population which might be affected and to exposed to a degrees of renewable water resources of at least 20%. And also pollution increase following extreme rain events with concern for drinking water treatment. We also know that there are some other alarming questions which are treatment plants are not able to actually clean all the water in a satisfactory way. There are some contaminants that stay, unfortunately, and because of the large investment they are due to remove. I'm talking about pharmaceutical, for example. So another concern. So we'll start with some good news later on. But anyway, water availability so is facing a lot of multiple global pressure. We said population growth, we said climate temperature rising, agricultural demand, changing diets. We live in a world that is connected, and also we transfer a lot of water from a continent to another under different products, so this is what is called the virtual water. But somebody still does not believe in global warming, and this is what is reported on that wall. So actually, how do we put water in the minds of people? There is this statue that is in Leuven in Belgium, and it's called the Fons Sapientiae, which means the source of wisdom. So it means that if we put water in the head of the people, we might become wiser, so why not? So how do we put this water in the head of people? Us in UNESCO, we're trying with this IHP, International Hydrological Program. Has anybody ever heard about this program in this room? Can raise a hand? Oh, so few. So maybe it's a good opportunity, the friends from France, of course. But so it's a good opportunity to show in a few words what is it, and also to realize how bad we are in communication, because if nobody knows, it's our major fault. So this is a program that is an intergovernmental program, so is run by member states which are part of UNESCO, of which we serve as a secretariat, and is a scientific cooperation program in water. It was created in '75, and is becoming, it has been the only program within the United Nations system. But actually is a more long-standing program than '75, because it started in '65 with this International Hydrological Decade. So it's over 40, 50 years ago, and it starting just a scientific program starting on experimental basin, characterization of large floods, world water balance, to know how much water was falling on this planet, how much was available, and so on and so forth. But it evolved throughout the years from experimental models to societal needs, because we all know that water is no longer a hard science, so is becoming and is most important a social issue and a political issue. So there's been also an improvement in development in this program to address more societal needs. And now we are in a phase, which is, you see it is with this circle in red, which is called water security, so responses to local, regional, and global challenges. So what we do, we are small, but we are, as you know, UN agencies are working with member states, but also at all different levels. And we try to have the most impact we can, being also small. So what we're trying to do is mobilize international cooperation, and this is done at all levels with all the member states, or the governments, or local governments, or institution, university. And we try to improve knowledge and innovation, strengthen the science policy interface, and then try to reach what is called this water security. And we have 6 different themes, from floods and droughts to groundwater to urban settlements to eco-hydrology, water education. And this is done, this is implemented through what we call the UNESCO Water Family. We have over 53 offices around the globe. We also have 56 chairs, UNESCO water chairs in different universities. And we have two in the US. We have the World Water Assessment Program, which is an extra budgetary program that promotes and publish every year the World Water Assessment Report, which is a flagship report of the UN system on water resources. And then we have 37 centers in 70 countries, and we can count on a large number of experts that are helping us in going on with that. So this is very quickly the location of the centers. We have one in the U.S., which is it's in the course of engineer, and those are the location of the chairs. So I'd like now to talk about a little bit about this citizen science. What is citizen science? Is a contribution by the public to citizens to research. It can be done at all levels, and projects involve non-professionals taking part in crowdsourcing, for example, data analysis and data collection. An example is in the Netherlands, for example. They are private people that are contributing to this by measuring their own water well and sending the results of the level to the institution concerned. Or other communities, for example, I recall a community in Bangladesh that for disaster prevention, what they do, they live at the slope of an area which is prone to landslides, so they measure the rainfall and they have a simple rainfall meter, a pluviometer, and they know when the rain reaches a certain threshold, this might trigger a landslide. So this is also in prevention. And there are many challenges also in this because the leverage of new technologies and ensuring a user-centered approach and adapted also governance and knowledge co-generation. But there are also opportunities because the use of these technologies by non-scientists and disadvantaged people is also possible, and also facilitate the involvement of marginalized community and increase openness and transparency. And I would like to give another example. This was an application that our division launched in the COP22. It's called iRain. And you know, rain can be detected by radars, so that's they look at clouds, and so they practically say how much rain is falling in a certain area, and you can, with this application, validate the data because you say, yeah, it's true, it's raining in my area. You don't know about the amount because the radar would tell you, but it's also a feedback to give to the institution running data to understand if their data are correct or not. Those might be gains, but they're very useful. And then also there are opportunities for capacity building and knowledge. I'd like now to bring some example in Latin America and Asia where nature-based solution has been applied. We've been conducting a work on the impact of glacier retreat in the Andes, and because not much is new in this about water resources in this area. And we're trying to take stock of existing knowledge to assess gaps, raise awareness, and strengthen networks. And so we went to a project in Peru and Bolivia, and where two types of harvesting system were put in place. Micro dams and atajados. Atajar in Spanish, I think it means to collect. No? And so there are systems like you blocking the water, so you avoid the runoff, you facilitate the infiltration, and also the atajados are, like the speaker before talked about, are infiltration area. And these are simple way to address some of the issue of water resources that can be replicated. I'm talking about small communities in a remote area. And another way is that to use what is called this concept of eco-hydrology. Eco-hydrology is the interaction between hydrology and biological processes. So you use water and biota, water and plant, to regulate the water in terms of quantity, in terms of quality. It implies a scientific knowledge, but this can be easily transferred to at community level. And we had established a network of 23 of these demonstration sites where very easy solution to clean water or to increase the amount of water are spread in the planet in 18 countries. Those are demonstration sites which are functioning and are also monitoring projects. And one of the last one that joined last February, the network is a project in Ecuador, in South Ecuador. It's called Aspaltas, where they are recovering the ancestral water system with this eco-hydrological approach. And this allowed, for example, to have to go from 1 hour of water supply per day to 6 hours, because also what they have done is constructing micro dams and infiltration zones again. But so not only stopping the runoff and to have more infiltration for groundwater, at the same time you reproduce the ecosystem that you lost in the past because of pasture and agriculture. So by having water, it triggers the growing of plants, which reduce the evapotranspiration. So you have more water, you have more biological processes that are put in place, and rehabilitation of ecosystem. So it's also, this is very important because this site is the testimony of an ancestral water management with the unique presence of ancient rock carvings, as you see on the photo on the right, on the low, and recreated the system of wetlands, which has inspired current practices of water management. So it's science, is local community, is local knowledge, and also a culture of cultural value. Last example is in Ethiopia, an area that was heavily contaminated with nutrients and dioxin, with some use of techniques which are very simple, also because the small scale of the project. There have been a reduction of these nutrients, dioxin, and the water is used to supply water for the city of Zasela. These are projects that are run by communities with absolutely no influence from external partners so far when they're working. No, last but not least, the links, which I have some, also some very light pamphlet. If you can have, I can put it in the reception. Is the UNESCO's engagement with indigenous people. As I said, this is a division within our science sector, and communicating, the major aim is to communicate in indigenous knowledge in the adaptations. And this program promotes local and indigenous knowledge and its inclusion in global climate science and policy processes, and has been influential in ensuring that local and indigenous knowledge holders and their knowledge are included in different action. For example, contemporary society, science policy society fora on issues such as biodiversity assessment and management, climate change assessment and adaptation, natural disaster preparedness, sustainable development, and this program works at all levels, and local, national, global levels. It started not a long time ago in mostly focusing on Africa because it's also a priority for UN agencies like ours. And there is also a recall of the in traditional knowledge in the Paris Agreement, and this is the article that shows how this is important and must be included in the process. And best possible knowledge. It's a dialogue of human knowledge, and also because adaptation is a quite complex interaction. You think about climate, biodiversity, our behavior, and a single discipline or knowledge system cannot cover the complexity of the processes, and we need systems thinking. So also considering that most indigenous knowledge of the environment, ecosystem, weather, and climate is held in undocumented oral systems managed by traditional indigenous institutions, so it's not easy reachable. So mobilizing indigenous and local knowledge requires a process of knowledge interface with natural and social sciences, communication strategy, and impact, to impact on policy making. So what they call a national adaptation plan is done through the indigenous knowledge plus the science. And these are just two graphs that shows how important is the link between the indigenous institution and our surrounding nature, and also how to bridge a relationship between the indigenous knowledge and the scientific knowledge. And then I would like to end by saying that indigenous knowledge, as we said, is extremely important, and I'm sure that everybody is convinced about it, because it holds also the memory of something that, as we saw, is not written down, and so it triggers wisdom. And I would like to read what this lady from the Afar region in Ethiopia said. If you want to understand what is happening in the lowlands, you have to go to the highlands to have a better view of what is happening down there. The same thing happens if you want to understand weather. You need to climb on the shoulders of elders to understand it. And with this, I conclude, and I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Giuseppe. You remind me of a quote from a Lakota leader that said that we are living in our children's past, and it is so true. As a community member, I recall the first time I heard the terminology watersheds, and I thought it was actually a shed that had a lot of water, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Since then, people have invested a lot of time and a lot of resources in me and affording me the opportunities to learn and engage. And because of those opportunities, I fell in love with fluvial geomorphology. I treasure the relationship between land and water. But I also realized that I needed to incorporate people as a very important component to my learning. A couple of decades ago, I made a choice to learn about neighborhoods, particularly around the interaction of water and community. I made a choice to prioritize the quality of life within the context of watershed management. And these choices have led me to the most interesting dialogues, to meet the most passionate people, and the opportunity to work with people of all ages in the interest of improving the health of watersheds, but also improving the health of community. My name is Miguel Luna, and I'd like to say that I work on water, people, and smiles. I want to touch a little bit on collaboration, and in preparation for it, I looked up the definition of collaboration on the Webster's Dictionary, and there's two. The first one is the action of working with someone to produce or create something. And certainly we know that collaborative approaches are essential for effective water management, especially in the face of climate change. We know that collaboration improves problem solving, and that it increases creativity and opens doors to innovation. And certainly collaboration can solve complex problems beyond the function of one domain or expertise. There's also another definition under collaboration, and it's just treacherous cooperation with the enemy. And perhaps treacherous is a strong characterization, but certainly trust and egos many times describe the way we operate currently. We shy away from the new ways of working because of the friction that may be caused during collaboration, because we'll all have to concede in order to come to consensus. And many times our egos don't allow us to step down from our expert pedestal to be open to learning new ways. I think we must challenge that 20th century solutions and be comfortable so that we can come up with 21st century solutions true to integrated water management solutions. I want to put up and share with you 3 statements, 3 myths that water is too complex for community members to understand, that people are too busy to get involved at a meaningful level, and that process is too labor-intensive and slow, and we need to fix it once and for all. And perhaps we indeed have turned the simple element into an esoteric topic that we can operate without being questioned by the general public. The economy at many levels have forced us to take on more work, multiple projects, more contracts that have made us really busy. And every day brings new challenges. And while we can certainly and should plan for the long-term haul, we must also learn to be adaptive. While we can agree that these statements can indeed be considered myth, I'd like to propose that these statements may also be treated similar to a complex mathematical theory, where we need to collectively rework the formula to figure out the new answers, to share and combine information in unexpected ways to reframe the problem. I want to do a brief exercise with all of you to talk about challenges and the way we can talk about solutions as well. So Hemingway is credited with the shortest novel ever written. The novel is For Sale, Baby Shoes Never Worn. Tells a lot. I want to challenge all of you to think in 6 words, to come up with your own novel, mix it up as you'd like, but think about the challenges and the solutions. Think about 20th century solutions compared to 21st century solutions. And I'm going to give you only 30 seconds to come up with your novel, and then I'm going to give you a minute to exchange with others. So, you have 30 seconds. Come up with your novel on your own. 6 words, on your own. No discussion, on your own. You have 10 seconds. How's everybody doing? 6-word novel, ready? All right. I want you now to turn to a neighbor and share with them your 6-word novel as it relates to water. And you have 1 minute. If you shared yours, let the other one share as well. Time's up. I'd like to bring everybody back. Let you know that you have an opportunity to share your novels at lunch, and that is the whole purpose. Thank you. Again, we encourage this to be the seed of conversation at lunch. We'll also do a 2-question survey that I'll bring up a little bit later, so that could be part of your conversation as well. And this novel is for you and to share with others, but certainly a good exercise to get you thinking and prioritizing about the things that matter. I'd like to now introduce Catherine Jacobs. She is the director of the Center for Climate Adaptation Science and Solutions at the University of Arizona. Here, she builds and supports climate change adaptation and assessment capacity at regional, national, and international scales based on climate science. It is focused on connecting science and decision-making and working with stakeholders to build collaborative solutions to climate-related problems. Ms. Jacobs is a full professor in soil. I said soil. Who asked me to say soil? Where's the intern? Water and environment science. Kathy will tell us how she's working to address these challenges. Please come up, share your thoughts.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to be here, and thanks, Celeste, in particular, for inviting me. This is really an opportunity for me to talk about collaboration, which is, in fact, the platform that was just articulated for us. A lot of the work that I've been doing in my entire professional career has been about connecting science and decision-making, and using networks to sort of connect people together, because we see how incredibly challenging it is to help people use science that's actually helpful for their own particular context, because it turns out everyone's context is really quite different. So I'm going to just take you on a whirlwind tour of some of the lessons that I've learned, and hope that you'll ask me questions about them in the after lunch part of this. So in my perspective, there's a lot of people who don't understand why this issue is so challenging, but also why the solutions are actually relatively simple. If you don't understand that the decision-making process is in the context of institutional constraints and opportunities and expectations, that people, all individuals, have different perceptions of risk, and they actually define risk differently, that they actually engage with information and science and facts differently. And if you haven't figured that out, you haven't been reading the newspaper, because clearly the role of facts in our society is rapidly evolving. But the decision context, the things that people bring to the table and the way they use that information needs to be understood if people want to sort of expect people to use their information. And yet scientists really don't even know what decision context means. And so there's this giant gulf between the people who actually are trying to use information and the people who are generating it. Then there's the motivations of people who are involved in these processes. And of course, they all have their own self-interest in mind, even if they mean to do the very best for society. It's impossible to get away from your own personal training and bias. And then many people don't understand the equity and social justice issues that are sort of embedded in many of the decision processes. So in my experience, I've been involved in a whole array of ways of trying to solve some of these problems. I worked to establish something called the Arizona Water Institute, which was designed to take all of the 400 faculty members across the 3 universities in Arizona and help them engage with communities in real-world decision-making processes and help solve problems. And the issues of translating for faculty members how to talk in a normal language were every bit as dramatic as helping stakeholders engage with the science. So it's really a serious language problem and a very big challenge and opportunity to sort of design a boundary organization from the ground up. The second one was a research program looking at stakeholder engagement and how stakeholders actually have contributed or not to decision processes. The third was building the National Climate Assessment for the United States. I had the amazing opportunity of being the director of that assessment in the Obama administration, and that was yet another version of boundary organization. And then the fourth is the center that I run now, which is really trying to aggregate across the University of Arizona our own capacity, and then trying to help people outside the university access that more effectively. So this is, again, a whirlwind tour. The Arizona Water Institute was a consortium of Arizona's universities focusing on improving quality of life through research, technology transfer, education, and capacity building. And it was really a huge experiment, which was largely successful until the governor of Arizona decided to leave and join the Obama administration, at which point the entire thing imploded. And of course, there is a lesson to be learned there, which is that boundary organizations live in the space between, the the other organizations, and so are often not quite as robust as one might hope. So in sort of about 3 years, we were able to engage in about 100 project partnerships with the Arizona Water Institute, and it is going forward. We really helped to define and coordinate the research needs across all of those universities and across stakeholder groups in the state. And the whole point of it was really trying to maximize the utility of university research in the real world. Now, there are universities all over the world. There is potential for significantly improving their capacity to be useful, but it does require people who understand both sides of that fence, and there are so few people who can do that. So this is a big opportunity, but also a big need. It's really amazing how hard it is to do this work. So then the next one of my little adventures has to do with linking knowledge with action for sustainable development. This was an international assessment of the role of stakeholder groups in water decision processes in 4 different watersheds in Thailand, Brazil, Arizona, and Mexico. And we did learn quite a lot in those processes. One of the findings was not a big surprise to me at all, and that is, though the optics are clearly improved by getting people engaged, the stakeholders engaged in these processes, it doesn't necessarily guarantee a more sustainable outcome. So you might have a more political and acceptable solution, but it may or may not, by some objective standard, be more sustainable. Also, there are multiple transaction costs associated with engaging with stakeholders, which is one of the reasons why many people shy away from it. It costs money, it costs time, and you have to have trusted relationships, or it really is useless. Engaging stakeholders can lead to a lot of unexpected twists and turns in processes and a feeling of losing control, and that's actually one of the main reasons I see people going, that people who really don't want to engage entirely with stakeholders is the feeling of losing control in processes where you have timelines and outcomes and expectations. And time is a necessary ingredient that you can't replace with money and other kinds of resources in terms of building trusted relationships and actually causing good stakeholder engagements. And so the sort of overall conclusion from that was the need to manage the boundary between science and policy deliberately. Like, you can't just sort of open it up to chance and go, I'll just go wherever the stakeholders say and everybody will be happy. That's not going to work. But you also can't pretend that you're engaged in stakeholder processes and then use nothing from what you've learned. And so this is a really delicate dance that requires a lot of sophistication. And again, it's rare, very rare to see all of that happening in one place. So the third big experiment, which is by far my largest experiment, has to do with building the National Climate Assessment for the United States. So it's actually the third. They're required by law. The point of it is actually to assess the state of knowledge as the knowledge changes over time. So every 4 years, a report that is supposed to be written on how to summarize the science for the nation. What we did was essentially redesign it to focus more on decision support so that the goal was anticipating mitigating and adapting to changes in the global environment, not just summarizing the state of knowledge. And so in order to do that, we had to build a vision that was much more inclusive than historical national assessment activities have been, which are focused primarily on scientists and sort of summarizing their state of knowledge. It now is broader and inclusive, and including decision makers on the ground, tacit knowledge, indigenous knowledge, and so forth, and trying to knit all that together, which of course is a messy process, as has already been described. But this whole idea of doing this for the country and with the citizens is a really different approach to doing a national climate assessment than what has actually taken place in the past. It's hard for me to get to the next one. Here we go. So among the things we did differently, and just as a note, this is run out of the White House through 13 federal agencies, and there was a 60-member federal advisory committee, a not advisable way to get advice. So anyway, the whole thing was kind of messy, as everything I've been talking about has been, because that's how the world is. But anyway, we did change the way the assessments are done so that people on the outside could actually tell what was going on the inside, basically tracing the line of thought of the authors. They actually had to document which questions they were most certain about and why, and where their uncertainties were, and which kinds of literature they were most dependent on. So there's no more black box. It's all out there, and all the data are linked to the conclusions. The whole focus in terms of priorities was in a risk-based framework, which is, of course, how all of us operate, whether it's personal risk or organizational risk. We're all sort of maximizing opportunity and minimizing risk, whether we're aware we're doing that or not. But then looking at progress in responses and adaptation and mitigation, not just in science, fostering sustained efforts, meaning trying to build a process, not just write a report. And then we did deliver it electronically. It was the first major federal report, not delivered as a PDF. It was delivered as an interactive website. It's entirely searchable, and I recommend to you that you check it out, because we actually do have so many layers of information there that regardless of what level of stakeholder you are, you can just get the highest level message, but you can also click through to layers of data that come below it, sources and so forth. So just look up NCA 2014, or National Climate Assessment. It's on the Global Change Research Program website. So among the things we did that were different, we're building a giant network of participants. And so this is where I really came to appreciate the value of networks and the ability to scale things up big time through a network of networks, which we did we did this deliberately. But it actually sort of became a living being that went beyond the issuance of our report and went into a whole series of affinity groups focused on areas of interest. And just to give you an idea how powerful that was, we, the federal government, didn't really pay for any aspect of our communications and engagement strategy associated with this. We had a group of voluntary organizations who basically designed the whole communications process for us and implemented it. And we had 5,000 articles published within a month and 1.5 million hits on the website. So it is a pretty big deal using networks. And one of the things that I wanted to just share with you today is there's now a new process being developed to really take this whole idea further and build a civil society version of the National Climate Assessment. It's called the Applied, or will we hope be called, the Applied Climate Assessment Consortium. And we are in the process of reviewing a report on how to do this, taking it from a largely federal government centric approach to the National Climate Assessment to having sort of a parallel process where civil society can be engaged in both identifying the issues that need to be addressed and building the knowledge base associated with that. And of course, everybody wants their issue to be addressed, and of course we will make almost nobody happy initially because of essentially we don't have any resources at this point. But we are in a place where if we got a small number of resources, we think we can, through this network of networks approach, build something that is very useful for focus specifically on important decision-making contexts where we really could, through, for example, just making limited changes in engineering standards that are informed by this process, make a big difference across the country. So those decision contexts are the places where we have to focus. And then finally, and this most briefly, the center that I'm currently operating through at the University of Arizona which is the Center for Climate Adaptation Science and Solutions, also known as Kick-Ass, is focused on sort of building out through these it's actually CCAS, but my daughter calls it Kick-Ass. But anyway, the idea is, how can we sort of scale up impacts? How can we build from networks to impacts that are much greater than each one of us has in our own daily life? So bridging this gap between science and decision-making, also referred to earlier as the Valley of Death, is essentially where I have lived for the last 35 years, and I'm really anxious to get to the other side. Not there yet. But managing risk is a major motivator, and so sort of a good theme to work within. And then this whole idea of supporting transformational adaptation for extreme events, which I think many people don't understand, that these extreme events are now so extreme that our standard approaches to adaptation are no longer appropriate. And then trying to merge the communities of adaptation and mitigation, or climate emissions and adaptation and risk management, rather than having the risk managers and adapters over here and the people who are engaged in emissions management or renewable energy or whatever it is in a completely separate conversation. These things need to be merged. So this is sort of the general approach that comes from all that stuff I just told you about. Anyway, I'm going to stop now, but thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to questions that you might have afterwards. That's after lunch.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Kathy, for your comments. Yeah, I'm thinking of what popped at me was linking knowledge and action, and certainly, with knowledge, I won't quote Spidey, but with knowledge does come an obligation. Well, and I think that also, as much as we talk about investing in the physical infrastructure, we really have to be serious about investing in the social infrastructure if this is really going to work. In the spirit of adaptation, I would like to ask all of you to take a 45-minute lunch instead of an hour and return at 1:15. And while you do all of that, I sent just to all the participants on the app, the WOVA app, a link to us. It has this link to this survey. So if you could please take a look at it. It has only 3 questions. It will take you 2 minutes, and it will inform us for the next when we return. So please take the time. I sent you an email as well. Sorry if I bug you, but we really want your input. There's a fun one to start with on which one consumes the most water, beer, soda, wine, or tequila. We want to know. We want to know from all of you. So anyways, we'll break for lunch now, and we'll see you at 1:15, please. Thank you so much.